Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everybody logged in today. My name is Mary Owen, and I want to thank you so much for attending today's presentation on Arcserve by data protection. Stacy Budd, who's one of our principal consultants, will be your host today. And you can send him questions throughout the presentation. Just enter those into the questions section of your interface. We may get to some as we're going along. Otherwise, we'll get to it at the end of the presentation. Later this afternoon, I'll send everybody an email with a recording of this presentation, so you can keep an eye out for that. And with those things out of the way, take it away, Stacy.
Thank you, Mary, and hello, everybody. Today we're going to talk about, from a technical, positioning of Arcserve Unified Data Protection. We're going to take a look at the product and, the features of the product, and then we'll also show a quick demo of that product. That being said, we wouldn't do our due diligence if we didn't talk a little bit and speak a little bit to the company as well. So for those of you that aren't aware, Arcserve is a standalone independent company now, which is a fantastic thing. I've been with Arcserve a very long time, and I can tell you I've seen a lot of growth and innovation, since we've taken that step as an independent company. And I think we've been, recognized across the industry as far as that as well, with things like recognitions, at VMworld, which I was at, fantastic last year at San Francisco. Great experience there, and we were recognized, and given a gold award for, for a backup vendor, a virtualized backup vendor. So that was fantastic to get. And then we also got recognition across, at other VMworlds, right? So not just locally in the U.S., but globally as well, and otherwise, other recognitions too. When we look at our company, of course, we are, a global company with, presence in over 150 countries, a lot of different customers. It says 45,000 here. I wouldn't be surprised if that hasn't grown. A lot of customers using the UDP, the Unified Data Protection product, and of course we are a channel partner, right? So we go through partners, we work with partners, which gives us the ability to reach out to more people and things like that as well. So always a positive there when doing that, and it's great to have this presence, right, globally, and be able to learn from my peers, right? So that's one of the things that I'm part of, is like a global, if you will, pre-sales group, and we all ask each other questions and make observations and stuff like that, and a great amount of learning that you can get when you do that. When you look at data protection, right, and you look at why do people need to do this, right? We think this would be common sense, right? You back up, you protect your data, you save it from loss. There may be regulations, or there may be reasons why you have to do this, right? Above and beyond, you just want to do it, or you want to protect your data. Well, surprisingly, right, some of the things that I still run into is the simple fact that we run into customers that either aren't protecting their data, or they're not testing their systems, and we ran a and this is an Arcserve survey that we ran, right? But we not surprisingly, right, excuse me, we are still running into the fact that a lot of companies out there, that when they've had to utilize their DR solution or their backup solution, that it's failed to restore all of their data. Part of that comes to proper testing. Part of it comes to, hey, is the product really doing what you think it's doing? It may be hardware issues. It may be human. It may be, somebody forgets to change out a tape or a drive or something like that as well. There's a ton of reasons why, it's still important to, test and to look at your DR solutions. And I would say you do this all the time, right? Whether it's, and make sure that you have, and the products you have in place are going to fit your needs. And not only are they going to fit your needs, but you test and you know what those results are going to be, and you can plan on it. And when there is a disaster, it's not going to be a surprise that something doesn't work for you, or you don't have the data. You're prepped for it. So as we found out here, right, nearly 20% of companies have had to utilize their recovery solutions and failed to back up all their data, to get back all their data, right? So that's highlighted that issue there for us. When we look at Arcserve Unified Data Protection, really the goal behind this product, number one, above everything else, is simplification. making it easy to schedule your backups, making it easy to recover your data, making it easy to do your disaster recovery planning if you need to do that, and to bring that data back or bring that server online, whatever you might need to do as far as that goes. As a goal as far as that goes, right, we look at, you know, being able to integrate different functionalities, being able to support, you know, tape, cloud, replication to other locations, continuous data protection, high availability in some scenarios as well. We do include features like built-in global deduplication, archiving, things like that as well, infrastructure visualization, things to make it easier for you. All within one console, again, not stepping out because you want to back up a virtual machine, so you need to go to a different console, you know, but instead having all that capability, whether it's physical, virtual, or replication to another site, or high availability, it's all within one console, easy to use. I'm not going to read through this entire slide, but then, you know, the last piece is really the flexible licensing options, and I do want to kind of hit on that a little bit, because, you know, we give you the ability to shape and license the product as best fits your environment. For instance, you may have an environment with a lot of data but not very many servers. So you may look at, okay, now I want to look at maybe a per socket kind of licensing to fit that model. Whereas another customer may have a lot of servers, a lot of sockets, and not as much data, so they may go with the per terabyte model, right, and license it that way. Other than that, choosing if you want to go per socket or per terabyte, really that's about, you know, the complexity of this product. You don't have to worry about agents and options and, you know, a bunch of different things. So I have, you know, I have SQL, so I need a SQL agent, and I might need a client agent to access that server. It's not your traditional, you know, a la carte kind of all the different pieces. I have open files, different things like that. So it, again, go into that simplification, keeping everything easy, you know, not even from the product standpoint, but also from the perspective of licensing the product as well. When we look at, you know, an overview specifically of UDP, I'm going to go through, you know, a lot more specific slides here, but, you know, again, you know, what do we see here? Fast, simple, right? Efficient next generation data protection availability, right? So when we look at the console, right, it's going to be one unified management console with a lot of powerfully planned database protection options and policies that you can set within that. One of the things as we roll out new features to the product is we take a look and say, how can we make these new features great? We can now, you know, do snapshots, hardware-based snapshots, but let's make sure that that experience of doing that is going to be easy, you know, and it's not going to be difficult to do. And as we add in other features, you know, the same kind of thing. How can we keep this simple? I spoke a little bit about being able to back up, you know, physical and virtual machines the same with the same console. When we do back up virtual machines, it's going to be agentless, right? So give you the ability on VMware and Hyper-V specifically, but we do support other hypervisors. So, you know, I run into customers sometimes that they have KVM or they have Zen server, and we'll still support those. Those will be supported agent-based is the way that we would look at those particular ones. You know, also things like bring in source-side global deduplication, which is an inline process, deduplication process into the product, and quite frankly, bring in that capability down into the SMB market where, you know, it's previously been more of an enterprise capability, and now we're bringing it down to the mid-market and in some cases the small businesses as well. And I'm not going to read through this, you know, supporting, you know, the latest operating systems, applications, things like that as well. We're going to go through much of this as we progress. One of the strengths of UDP is as we scale out, our product does very well. You know, it can go into an environment that's one location, you know, not multiple environments, not multiple locations, but it does very well in that single kind of environment, whether it is physical machines, virtual machines, workstations you want to back up. Again, all the same console, all of that. We're going to have, you know, a centralized server, this recovery point server. Think of it as your backup server. It's the server that's going to run your deduplication processes, and we can also break different components out. So if we wanted to have a different console server, or, you know, different proxy servers to do the agentless side of things, we could break that out, or we could have it part of that centralized server, or in some cases an appliance as well, right? So we could do that too. And as the environment grows and we start to go off to other locations, so we're bringing data in from other locations, or maybe we're moving data from a customer to an MSP, right, to a location like that, or maybe this is even a cloud location, right? Our product spans very well. We would deploy a recovery point server out that location and then be able to replicate between those locations and do it intelligently, so and optimize in such a way that if you lose connectivity, you pick up where you leave off. You don't have to start all the way over from the beginning, and it's going to be very efficient as far as all that goes as well. As far as the management console, we're going to go in depth. I'm going to show you this in a moment here, but one of the biggest things that we added to Release 6 as far as the console itself goes is previously with the appliances, when we rolled out our appliances, we rolled out a configuration wizard. So you go into the appliance and it takes you through the steps. And that was well enough received, and we said, well, you know what, we need to make the experience with the appliances easier as well. So we did similar. We came out now with a configuration wizard for the software side of things, and that will take you through 4 easy steps of creating your first backup plan. Now, granted, it's going to be simple at this point. It's going to be daily, infinite, incremental backups. And then I can go in and I can edit that further if I want to add additional tasks, backup schedules, things like that. I can always go through and modify and add more if I need that. But it'll take you through 4 steps, and by the time you're done with that, you've done everything from discovery of the machines you want to back up. If you need to configure your backup destination, you can do that right there, and then set your backup plan and you're done. So we've definitely taken a lot, to, again, simplifying the experience that you're going to have. When you look at our product, it's going to be plan-based data protection, right? So we're going to have backup plans that we can then later add additional tasks to, like replication, like virtual standby, which we'll go over here in a moment, moving the data off to tape. That's a tape copy plan or task, excuse me. So we'll just have these tasks that you'll add to that plan, and just keeping it, again, okay, now I've set my backup plan. Now what do I want to do? Well, I want to replicate it to another location or to a cloud location. So I'll add a replication task. What is my remote location? It'll be very straightforward as far as that goes. When we look at the plan scheduling, so if you look at the very beginning inception of this product, it was Arcserve D2D. All it did was image-based backup. If you wanted to do replication, it was an additional product. If you wanted to centrally manage, it was an additional product. If you wanted virtual standby, it was an additional product. With UDP, it's all in one product, one interface. You don't really step out of the product to do those things that I just mentioned. One of the other things with D2D, it was very simple. It was, I want to do a backup every 15 minutes, every half hour, every hour, once a day, once a week, whenever I want to do it. This is how often I want to do it. Here's how many I want to retain. That didn't hit a need for a lot of customers out there that wanted to do more of a grandfather, father, son type of rotation, something that was similar to a traditional, if you will, tape rotation, right, or file-based rotation. What they would do, so now what we've added is the ability to add, not only backups throughout the day, your dailies, your weeklies, your monthlies, and keep all of those within that rotation. So have your retention period for each individual one of those that you want to set, and then have infinite incrementals if you want to do that as well within that, right? So we can have that. So it's more of a traditional kind of backup plan from that standpoint. However, if you just want to do dailies and keep 31 dailies, you could do that as well. If you wanted to do hourlies and just keep, a certain number of hourlies, you always have the option to just do that as well. So it kind of gives you that flexibility, the way that to fit your need for scheduling, right? I mentioned before that central recovery point server. I term it, you know, like the centralized backup server, if you will, if you think in terms of backup servers, you know, it's going to offload a lot of the processing that would normally be handled at the client side. So when we do the deduplication, it'll handle the deduplication side of things. When we do infinite incrementals, it'll handle the merge process that keeps you at your retention policy. So instead of that impacting your client servers or workstations, it'll handle all of that. Replication, it'll handle, you know, the replication task. So it keeps that, of course, centralized. So now that server, you can plan for that, and you can go ahead and to not impact your client servers as much, which is always the goal, right? You want to be able to back up. You don't want, if you back up throughout the day, you don't want to impact your client machines very much as well as that. We also have methods when we create this recovery point server and the data store that it's going to go off to do what we call jumpstart, which is to copy that backup, that initial backup, off to removable media, so then you can import it into your other location so that you can go through and kind of do a seeding, if you will, so you're not replicating as much data to begin with. And when you replicate across that wire, we're going to take advantage of deduplication as well, so that you're just going to be sending the unique blocks, I should say, of the data over to the remote location, so you can have advantages as far as that goes as well. And with this version, I mean, it goes without saying, you know, we're always looking at ways to increase the performance. So we took a big step in overall increasing the performance of this recovery point server as well. So we've taken big steps in that. One of the big features of Unified Data Protection is being able to go through and be able to do infinite incremental backups. This gives you the ability, and number one, we always talk about infinite incrementals as being a space savings. Really, to me, it's a time savings, right? Because if I do a full backup and from that point on only do incrementals, right, how much quicker is an incremental backup compared to a full backup? I have customers that they talk to me and they say, well, we run our full backups, you know, on the weekend, and we're lucky if they finish midday Monday. Right, they start sometime Friday night, and they might finish midday Monday. Well, this gets rid of that need in order to do that, right? So now I do my initial full. We always have to start with a full at some point, and then we're going to take and we're going to do our incrementals up to a point of what our retention is. Now remember, this is independent, whether it's daily, weekly, monthly. We would have a retention for each individual one of those. When we hit that max level, we'll go ahead and take another incremental backup, and once that's done, we'll go ahead and merge that full into the oldest incremental, right? We do that at the recovery point server, so you're not impacting your client server again. So this is handling it, you know, on that end. We never have to do a true up, do a new full, or anything like that. Now, there's always exceptions to rules, right? So if you have data corruption or something happens to your disk or something like that, we may recommend that you go through. If you can't repair it, you go through and you start a new full and a new chain as far as that goes. But the goal here is, you know, to not have to do those full backups, to save your time, be able to do faster backups. Now you can start doing backups throughout the day, so your recovery point is really going to be can be much more aggressive if you need it to be, right? So keep that in mind. Of course, when we look at things like adding deduplication to that process, it's going to shrink down the storage that you need on top of that as well. When we look at the deduplication that we do, first off, global deduplication. So the data is going to be deduped across the board, meaning that once we do the deduplication, we're going to first start with the source side deduplication. That's at the client. Instead of sending the data to the recovery point server, we send the hash files that are generated. It's going to be much less to go across the network at that point. Then we're going to, at the recovery point server, we're going to compare those hash files to the data store and do a global deduplication process. What's important here is this is an inline process, meaning the data does not need to reside on disk first. Right, so we're going to do this in memory, and then we're going to respond back to the client. Okay, that data that you thought was unique, actually, you know, it was, you know, a patch that went out to all of your Windows servers. So I've already got it from one, so I don't need it from the rest of you, or I need it, you know, just a limited amount of data from the other servers. So that is the only data that's going to go across the wire, right? Is that unique data that's truly unique at a global standpoint. And when we replicate that data from a recovery point server on-site to another recovery point server, again in the cloud or a DR location, whatever it might be, we're going to do that same process, that global deduplication process. So first we'll send the hash files, and then we'll respond back and say, okay, out of that data you thought was unique, I got it from 4 other sites, so go ahead and just send me this unique data out of there, right? Other kind of things, so the impact, right, the savings is going to be the network, impact. It's going to require a lot less bandwidth. You're going to get overall higher deduplication ratios with that as well. And then also, when we do need to move that data off for things like moving it to tape or something like that, so I do need to do that, we'll rehydrate that data and it would reside on tape undeduplicated or rehydrated, right? So if I needed to restore that data, all the data is there on the tape. I don't have to start searching all over for it because I have pointers pointing to other tapes or anything like that. So it'll make the restore from tape, if you need to do that, much easier as far as that goes. Now I've been talking, a lot about, replication within the product. It is included in all levels of UDP. And it is a block-based, replication that goes from recovery point server to recovery point server. And I would be replicating those entire backups, right, to the other location. Again, only the unique data if you're running deduplication. By the way, deduplication is also available in all levels of our licensing. So there's not some that get it and some that do not. Right, we mentioned a little bit about replicating to other locations or cloud locations. One of the new features of version 6 is this gateway management piece, where we can put a gateway server in place, a recovery point server behind it, or maybe even on the same server if you want to install them on the same server, and it can simplify that that replication process. And what I mean by simplify it is a lot of times you would look, okay, what ports do I need to open up? With this, you don't have to worry about any of that. There'll only be one port that we communicate over, and that gateway server will then break it out for you. So you'd put this in your DMZ or something like that we would connect to, and then it would give you that advantage. And from your console, you'd be able to manage that other site, that other location as well. So it gives you some easier, more simplified management within that as well. Talked a little bit about scheduling and retention. Of course, we could have different retention policies at the other site. We could, have additional, jobs that are running at the 2 locations, and we do support, all the other features, right? Compression, deduplication, encryption, as we're sending that data across the wire too. Just hitting on that point that I spoke to the Jumpstart, right? Being able to offload your backup to removable media, so if you do have that remote recovery point server, you can manually seed it so that now you don't have to worry about that big, large amount of data that's going across the wire. It's interesting because I've spoken to some customers that have terabytes upon terabytes of data, and they know that first backup is going to take a long time, and they're like, well, we don't care. We're just going to go ahead and start replication and replicate it that way. Other customers, of course, they want to start being able to offload their data right away and have that there. So they're really, on board about this Jumpstart process. If you will, you could even take a secondary server, bring it into your same location, Jumpstart from one server to the other server, and then ship that server to the other location and bring it online in the other location, and you've already done that piece. So, or maybe it's a NAS box or something like that, right, for the storage. So there's a lot of different ways to go ahead and take advantage of that. Of course, we do support, public cloud, Amazon Azure, Rackspace, all of those as well. We have our own cloud offering too, and those would be other examples when you might want to seed or jumpstart the data, and bring it in, mainly in those locations. So we do have those options for you as well. When we talk about backing up virtual machines, specifically VMware and Hyper-V, we do support their storage APIs in order to do an agentless backup, right? There will be a proxy, right? That proxy could be a recovery point server. It could be a virtual machine. It could be a physical machine. In some cases, you may have multiple proxies depending on the number of simultaneous servers you want to back up and all of that as well. It does give you the ability, you don't have to worry about installing things like the agents down on the machines, or in the case of VMware, right, they have the VIX piece. You don't have to install that either with this. We're going to grab just the change blocks. That's where the hypervisor is going to present out to us, and that's where we're going to back up and, of course, dedupe against those change blocks. We do support the latest versions of VMware, so VMware 6 virtual volumes are supported as well, 2012, 2012 Hyper-V server, CSV, and I should have said R2 on the end of those, right? So 2012 R2, and the clustered share volumes are supported too. VSS aware, applications like SQL, Exchange, Active Directory, those are going to be supported. We'll be able to purge the logs, and do log truncation, so we can do that as well. And then one of the things not to be overlooked is that we can do granular restore. So even though we're backing up an entire VM, we can go through and individually restore a file or a folder and do that very simply, right? You don't have to mount a backup or anything like that to get into that. Virtual Standby is, it's a very nice DR tool, disaster recovery tool, that's going to give you the capability as you create your backup plan to add this Virtual Standby task. And what it will do is it'll give you the capability to go in and convert that backup that you've done over to a virtual machine ready to turn on. Right? So that's the advantage to Virtual Standby. If you've replicated the data as part of your task, so you have a backup task, a replication task, and now you create a Virtual Standby task, well then that Virtual Standby could be remote, so it could be at another location. Now, Virtual Standby is going to monitor the source machine to make sure that the source machine's up and running. If it's not up and running, we give you the ability to automatically fail over or manually fail over. And the machine's already created from your backup. Right, so the time to spin up that machine would be the time that it takes to normally start up that server with those services and those kind of things. So of course you're gonna assign the resources to that machine, the number of processors, amount of memory, and if anything, the only drawback to Virtual Standby is there is 3 copies of the data. There's the source data, there's the backup data, and now there's the standby machine. And to kind of address that third copy, because not everybody can afford to set aside that we've come out with the instant virtual machine feature, which we'll talk about here in a moment. So that is very similar to that, but you lose that need for the third copy of the data. Other features within the product: full system high availability. So right within the tool, you're able to wrap up an entire server, create a virtual machine of that server, do continuous replication of the changes, the bit level changes that are happening, to that machine, and then have automated testing, automated failover, all that within the product as well. So we call it assured recovery, and that machine's going to come back online. This is, again, right within the tool, right within the console, to give you that capability to do that. So it's very nice capability within the product for the most important servers that you can't afford to have, a few minutes or an hour or whatever it is of a recovery point, right? You need that recovery point to be up to date, and you can definitely do that with full system high availability. I did speak a little bit to the assured recovery. This is where we take that virtual machine that we've created, we mount it on a different network, we make sure things like SQL, Exchange, custom scripts that you write are ran, whatever you want to do as far as that goes, and give you a pass-fail. And then once we've done that test, we bring back down the machine. It's never impacted our production machine, and then we go ahead and apply any changes that occurred, and we replicate it over during that test. Definitely taking and bringing in reporting. Now we have quite a few reports from, being able to see what's going on with your week's worth of backups, being able to see what's going on with your storage, being able to see, the amount of data you're backing up, and the results from deduplication. But then we also give you access to the database. So our database schema is an open schema that we'll share with you, and you can run your own custom reports. So if there's a report that we don't have, right, that you need to be able to pull, most likely the data is there in the database, and you can use Crystal Reports or a SQL report writer or something like that to pull that information. And I always tell people, if you do that, let us know, because if it's a report that enough people are doing, we might actually include it in the product and just make it an included report, because if you're doing it, more than likely somebody else is also pulling that report. Now, when we look specifically at release 6 or version 6 of the product, right, when we took that leap into version 6, one of the things, again, was to try to make the product, simpler, again, unifying capabilities. We did some big steps on bringing Linux up to parity with Windows, so that everything that we did on Windows we could do on Linux as well. So we did big steps on that, again, around simplifying the product and bringing in enterprise class features like, snapshot integration, hardware snapshot integration, role-based administration, so different people can have different access to what they do and different rights. So we've definitely brought those features in. Again, still trying to keep them simple and easy to use, right? We've added a unified product installer, so now there's less questions when you go out and buy our product what you're going to download, right? So there's one installer, has access to our different products there, UDP, Arcserve Backup, and Replication High Availability. It clearly states out which ones you need, and it gives you the ability, hey, if I want to install this and run it a 30-day trial and see what it looks like, you're able to go ahead and do that too. So it gives you those added benefits, right? And you can install everything right from that one installer, right? You can always go back to it and it'll look and see what you have installed, and it can kind of say, okay, here's the other pieces that you need. So if you wanted tape integration or something like that, you could do that as well. Now, ease of use and setup and deployment, we talked a little bit about the getting started wizards, and all of that as well. License activation management, again, trying to make that easier for the user, and bringing in the tape management piece into UDP, so you can create your backup plans that are moving off to tape and copy into tape right within UDP. You don't have to go into Arcserve Backup anymore to do that. To that point, when we look at this, it'll just be an additional task that you choose here, which will be, here's my backup task, here's my replication task, and I'll just add a copy to tape task, and I'll define what do I want to copy to tape, my dailies, my weeklies, my monthlies, what do I want to have go over to tape, and we're going to be able to do everything right from within UDP, no more stepping out into Arcserve Backup in order to create your backup plans. Of course, we're still going to leverage Arcserve Backup in order to do this. We have nearly 30 years in Arcserve Backup, where we've, have support for just about every tape device that's out there, so we're not going to throw that away. So we're still going to leverage that, but now it's going to be more behind the scenes as opposed to having to step over and use a different console and interface in order to do that. One of the features that we had previously was file copy, but you could only file copy from an AS box. You couldn't do it when the data was, from a recovery point server, right? Which is a big point of our product, is that centralized server, so you can replicate, you can dedupe, and you can do all those other things. Now we're able to directly take the data from the recovery point server and copy it off to another location, a share, cloud location, whatever you want to do. So this is at the file level. I'm taking individual files from my backups and I'm moving them over to another location. On top of that, we also give you the ability to do what we call copy archive, which would take the data off of the source, and at this point it's moving it, right? It's removing it from the source, leaving behind a stub file so that you know where it is and you can recover that data, right? So, and then taking it, moving it off to that cloud location or NAS or lower end storage or something like that you may have, and of course doing this based off the size of the file, when it was last accessed, when was it created, a bunch of different rules as far as that goes, and again leaving behind that stub file, so if somebody goes to access it, it'll bring up the stub file and say the data is located on here, please contact your administrator to recover this data. So it's fairly, straightforward as far as that goes, and it's a nice feature to have added into the full functionality of the product now. I mentioned before, improvement from a perspective of speed, but then also, from a perspective of the type of restores that you do. Instant virtual machine recovery is one that's going to come into play here as well. We'll talk about that. Enterprise storage array hardware snapshots. So we now support NetApp and Nimble, right, to be able to perform hardware snapshots. It's as simple as when you're creating your backup plan, you just say, just click the radio button which says perform hardware snapshots. Now there is one step other than this, and that would be that you discover that device, but the IP of that machine, of that storage, either Nimble or NetApp, so that you'll have it in the console. But that's all it is. Provide the IP address, the credentials to log into it, and you're pretty much done at that point. There's licensing, that you'll have to have, that those vendors require you to have certain levels of licensing in order to do hardware snapshots. So those will still be in place as well. But from a perspective of Arcserve, all you need to do is discover it and then go in and enable the hardware snapshot as part of the backup plan. It's one button and you're done. In fact, you could have it available on all your plans, and whenever you do bring that in, it would go ahead and be there for you. We would first attempt to do a software snapshot or a hardware snapshot, see there's a hardware device, and then default to a software snapshot. Instant virtual machine recovery. If you remember when I was speaking to virtual standby, we were talking about the ability, I was talking about the ability to have that standby machine and do the automated monitoring of the source machine, and you do that at the cost of an additional set of data, right, because we do that. Instant virtual machine instead, what it's going to do is it's going to give you the capability with 4 steps, right, to go in, point to a machine, a backup that you want to recover, and will emulate that to your host, right, as if it were actually a virtual machine. So 2 things are going to happen here. Number one, you're going to have a lot more flexibility because you'll be able to choose which one you spin up, right? Also, on top of that, you're not going to have that storage commitment because there is no actual machine created. You do this at a cost, right? You do this because now you've added networking into a networking layer into it, so your performance probably will not be as good as virtual standby. However, we are going to cache the changes. We are going to give you the capability then, if you want to make that a permanent machine, to use features like vMotion or live migration within Hyper-V, right, to be able to convert those over to actual virtual machines if you wanted to do that. So it gives you that ability to have a little bit more flexibility. Maybe there's some machines that I'd like to have, some capability, some DR capability, but I really don't want to set aside additional storage because they're not that important, right? Those that are most important and I can't afford, I need some automatic failover, yes, they can come by from my latest backup, which is every hour or 2 hours or whatever it might be. Well, then those maybe we run virtual standby on. And those that we have the highest need, we have high availability for, right? So those that really need the uptime. So it gives us a good, deep kind of offering for different DR needs that are out there. On the Linux side, we're able to do a feature called Instant Bare Metal Restore. You can also do Instant Virtual Machine, by the way, on Linux as well. But this feature has not made itself to the Windows side. I'd like to see it make it there soon, or hopefully in the future. But what it does is very similar. It's going to go out and it's going to discover a machine, right? So you'll boot up a Linux machine, boot it up with live CD, and we're going to leverage, what is it, NTFP, I think it is, or bootp in order, so sort of like a Pixie boot, right? It comes up, it identifies itself on the network either by MAC address or IP, and we'll know it's out there, we're waiting for it, and we'll go ahead and start imaging that machine, so we do not need to have local access to that machine, right? So it gives you that capability to do a remote restore to it. On top of that, somebody starts using it right away and they go to access data and the data is not on that machine, we'll go ahead and grab that data and put it on that machine as they go to access it. So it'll give them the ability to do a faster restore, right? They don't have to wait till it's completely restored before they start using it. So that's a nice feature that we've added within Linux. For Exchange, right, being able to restore granularly down into, mailboxes, folders, message files, it's a fairly easy process. Before, within the product, we could do email level granular restore of emails, but we couldn't do things like public folders or contacts or calendar items. Now we get a much more granular capability of what we can restore, and again, trying to keep it very simple, very straightforward to do that. Do you want to restore it to the original server? Do you want to restore it to a different mail server? Do you want to restore it to a PST? What do you want to restore it to? Those are your different options as far as that goes. I think we're nearing the end of the presentation. I'm going to hop over in just a minute and show you the product. We'll do that relatively quickly, right? So we'll go through a quick kind of just high level of the product, show some basic things, backups, restores, and then we'll answer your questions. I do see there's a couple of questions out there as well. So other things that we added, right? Role-based administration, having different users have different access. My favorite example of this is I'm the administrator, or maybe in that rare case that there is a dedicated backup administrator. I don't know that there's too many of those left, but I'm the guy that manages this product, and I've done a lot of work setting it up and all of that. And I have it just the way I want, but I want to go on vacation. I want to go to Tahiti, right? And where I'm going, there's not going to be any cell coverage. So, I have to give somebody else access to do everything. Well, I can give them the access to do everything, but turn deletions completely off. So they can't delete anything that I've done. They could do all new stuff, right? But they can't delete anything, so that when I come back in the office, I know that what I've done is still going to be there, and now I just need to look at what they did and what they had to address. Same thing, I could have restore administrators, all the normal administrators that you'd have within a backup product, and I can create those custom kind of groups to really limit or open up what I want them to be able to do. This one right here, rebootless Windows agent deployment, is one of the biggest features of the product. It's kind of one of those quick, easy things. I say that, kind of with the wink, wink, nudge, nudge, because I'm sure our developers, they had to rewrite our driver, right? So I'm sure, they wouldn't have said it was, that simple and that easy. But it's one of the things that, oh yeah, we do rebootless Windows management agent deployment now. So we don't need to reboot a machine if we deploy out an agent or update an agent or something like that, where in the past we did have to do that. So when I talk to customers, current customers of UDP, this is one of the biggest things they're excited about, because now they make a change or, again, update the agent. They don't have to worry about, rebooting their machines. There's always exceptions, right? But generally, this is going to be a rebootless process, so just keep that in mind. There may be some unique scenario that comes up in your environment that may require that, but I don't think it's going to be that often. And we've added some command line functionality within the product as well. Be able to do backups, restores, those kind of things via PowerShell, so if you want to do that too. And this is kind of, we have a limited amount of command line right now, to be honest with you. It's a first step into it to give you some access to it. Hopefully we'll be growing that to, being able to do everything command line, but right now we can do the main things that most customers are looking for doing, which is, again, creating backups on the fly, doing those, doing restores, and all of that command line. There's a few others I'm not mentioning. Those are just the main ones. That gateway feature, being able to manage a remote site and be able to not have to open, multiple ports in a firewall and all that as well. I mentioned role-based administration, be able to go down into, and you could see what some of the categories here: backups, nodes, data stores, restores, high availability, right? And then we have those pre-made kind of, somebody just to monitor or run restores, or just to do the backups. We have those as well. We've simplified, the way to add and gather your diagnostic information for if you need to open a support case. We've also, in the past, you had to provide you had to provide a session password. Even if you were encrypting or non-encrypting, you still had to do a session password. So we've now made that optional. So if you just want to run backups, you don't want to password protect the backups or something like that, you have that option there as well. And we've also rolled out a capacity planning tool. This helps you kind of define, the requirements for your unique environment based on the number of servers, the amount of data, how frequently you want to back them up, what your growth rate is, all those things that when somebody asked me before, how much memory do I need to put in my machine, I was like, you know what I mean? Because it was really, it's so unique to the individual environment that now we have a tool out there to help you kind of define what you'll need as far as that goes. And then, of course, supporting the latest, operating systems and applications from a Windows perspective and from a Linux perspective there as well. And I'm not going to read through all the Linux pieces here. Just keep in mind that definitely, we've brought up to parity everything that you could do on Windows, you can now do on Linux, and that was a big step for us. Right, and then looking at all the different features and capabilities within that, from instant VM, instant BMR, hardware snapshots. Again, I'm not going to read all this off to you, but definitely all these, that features that we brought into the product too. Right. All right. So for takeaways, before we go into the quick demo that I'm going to do, we've definitely improved product unification. We've made the installation and deployment easier. We've unified the tape piece. I know a lot of people are getting away from tape, but still for long-term retention, I still have a lot of customers that do still need to use tape for that, so we've made that more unified within the product. More recovery options and making sure those recovery options are fast and flexible, right? Adding things like instant VM and the instant BMR is a good example of that as well. Bringing up Linux so that it now has parity with Windows, and adding things like role-based administration, the command line, and the rebootless agent deployment. All right. So let me go ahead real quick, and I'm going to share out my server here. I think I am. There we go. Yeah, like I said, we're just going to go through, a few things. I want to leave time for questions, so I know we're getting near the end, so I'm not going to go into too much detail. But I thought I would go through and just show one kind of restore option that we have here. I didn't spin up all my servers. I only have a few of them spun up here. But when you log into the console, notice it was just, my administrative information. If I did role-based administration, right, I could have done me as a backup administrator logged in there as well. It is interactive. Our first tab, which is the dashboard, to show you the state of your backups, your storage, those kind of things, and I can drill down into these. So if I had failures, I'd be able to drill down into them and be able to look at them. From a resource perspective, this is where you're going to do 90% of everything that you do within UDP. This is where you're going to create your backup plans. This is where you're going to do your restores, define your cloud environments, define your hardware-based devices, all of those. You'll notice we have some that are red here. That's just because I didn't bring up my entire environment in order to do that. I only brought up certain machines. So from a perspective of just creating a backup, I think that's what I want to do today. And just show you that configuration wizard that we came out with. So we're going to go into configuration wizard. This is what you see when you first log into UDP, and when you at any time, it's always available there on the right side of the resource tab, so you can go back into it. So in these 4 steps, I'm going to create a backup plan. I'm going to go through and I'm going to name my plan, right? So we're just going to call this a test plan. Choose what I want it to be, agent-based, agentless, whatever I want it to be. Either agent-based Windows or Linux, or agentless, which I don't care if it's Windows or Linux once it's an agentless plan. And we'll keep ours agent-based and again keep everything simple and flowing quick here. And I can discover those machines either by IP address, host name, through Active Directory, or in the case like I've already done where I've already discovered them through UDP, I can just bring them right in through the UDP console. And we'll add this manager server to my list. And we'll choose next. I'm now at my third of 5 steps. It's really 4 steps because the 5th step is just a confirmation step as far as that goes. We'll go through, and my destination is a data store, but let's say on my recovery point server, but let's say I haven't created that yet. Right? It could be, by the way, it could be instead a network share if I wanted to go to that, or another drive on a machine. But to get that functionality of deduplication, replication, offloading some of those processes, you definitely would benefit from having a recovery point server. So definitely I'd recommend that. If you haven't already installed the recovery point server, then you can go through at this point, go through, click add, and you can deploy the software right out through here as well. If you haven't already created your data store that you're going to back up to, you can go ahead and do it here. Right? I'm going to go ahead and click that one, and we'll just kind of see what that looks like. We would give it a name. We would give a folder location. This would be somewhere on a NAS box, direct attached storage, SAN, iSCSI, Target, or even a share. Right? We could do that as well. You wouldn't get as good a performance, but again, that's nothing to do with our product. That's just connectivity-wise. A direct attached storage is going to probably be your best, right? And then you go from there, depending. So those normal rules would apply. Number of current nodes, that could be backed up at one time. If I tried to back up 5, it would just queue the 5th one, and once one was finished, it would start with the next one. Size of the deduplication, I really didn't go into this, but you can see we do very granular deduplication. So I can go down to 4K deduplication, right, and be very granular as far as that goes. We do that at a cost of resources. We need more resources with the smaller block sizes. So you could go up to what our new default is at 16K. Now you're still going to get good deduplication ratios. However, your memory requirements aren't going to be as good, right? Or as I shouldn't say as good. They aren't going to be. I'm going to larger blocks, so I'm not going to require as much memory, right? But my deduplication ratios aren't going to be as good, right? So you do a trade-off there. More memory in a machine, in a backup server, means you can have a higher level of deduplication, require less storage, those kind of things. And we can do some other things here, right? So if I am going to dedupe, I'm going to have multiple locations where I keep my data, my hash, my index, all of that. Do I want to enable compression and encryption? Those kind of things. The important thing here is you're going to make those decisions at a data store level so that when you create your backup plans, those are all things you don't have to worry about. Our last step is really going to be to go through then and choose, what are we going to do if we need to deploy the agent out, when do I want to deploy it, my first backup, which is going to always be a full, what time do I want that backup to occur, and then after that, when do I want my daily infinite incremental backups to run. Now, remember that we can go through and we can add additional backup schedules. So I want to do dailies, weeklies. I don't want to do infinite incrementals. I can always make those changes by going into the backup plan and adjusting the schedule once I have the plan created. And I would go into next, and it would just give me a plan here, right? So here's my plan, right? It's an agent-based plan. I'm backing up this server to this destination, and here's my schedule. And I could continue to create plans. So if I wanted to stay in here and have plans for other servers, maybe multiple servers in one plan, whatever I want to do, I could just continue to stay in here and do that, right? Or I could go ahead and select next, and it would deploy out that plan in order to do that. So hopefully that shows you, kind of from an ease of use standpoint, how easy it is to create a backup plan and do that. Once we have those plans created, it's as simple as going into a machine and choosing, backup now or restore if I want to do something on the fly, or just whenever that schedule were to run. And I've given us a few minutes here to answer questions, so I'm going to pop back over. And I'm going to just address any questions that are out there, being cognizant of everybody's time. So the first question that I see is from Kim. Now, unfortunately, it looks like Kim had left, but her question probably may still be relevant to the group. Is it possible to back up a single server to archive it off your decommissioning server or create a custom job and select the machines that you want to back up? So to answer that question, yes, you can back up a server. You could, okay, now I don't want to delete this server, right? So I can definitely take at that point and I could do a couple of different things. I could copy it off to another set of media if I want to do that, either tape or disc. I could leave it on there and just, not delete that at all, right? So that would be another option for you. Even maybe move it out to cloud. So we have a lot of different options there for you too. So a question from Warren Chartier. I probably butchered name. Sorry about that, Warren. But can the backup agent connect to an RPS or gateway over the internet without requiring a VPN? Well, that's what that gateway server is basically creates a tunnel, right? So that would be the role of that. If you need that secure connectivity, you could connect through the gateway server, and that would provide that for you. So that would be the feature that we'd use to do that. A link to the capacity planning tool for Jonathan. I think that what we can do, it's on our downloads page, but I'm sure, I know Mary will be sending out an email at the end of this, and we can always include that link as well as part of that email. So definitely we can provide that for you. So here's a great question. Is it possible to back up the data on a NAS device on the network? So in the case of, and I think this is your question here, David, is that, the data itself is on a NAS, right? So if it's a Windows-based NAS, right, Windows 2000, 12, storage server, I'm sure we support earlier versions as well. Well, then yes, we can do that because it can run VSS on that box. If it's a NAS box, that is another OS on there. Then what we can do is we can leverage Arcserve backup to back up the CIFS share and be able to do that and back it up in that manner. So we do have some capabilities. So this would be one case if it's a CIFS share that we're trying to back up that we may look at using the Arcserve backup tool just to back up that. And I have some customers that do UDP for everything, and then they use Arcserve backup to back up that CIFS share. And we do have licenses that include that, so you don't have to worry about licensing the Arcserve backup separately or anything like that. So we do have a way of doing that. Today it's outside of the console. I hope in the future we'll see that move into the console itself. An example of having one full backup and 4 incrementals, if something happens to, say, incremental 2 and 3, is the data in the incremental 4 still recoverable, or since it's incremental, is only the full and incremental 1 valid? So this would be a case where, of course, we have tools in order to do repairs and things like that as well. This is why you would take and you would run a verification job within your rotation so that you would be aware and nothing would back up and merge into your full. Right, so you'd be aware when that happened. So even though you're doing infinite incremental, somewhere within your rotation, put a verification job that looks at the chain of that. If we can't repair that and we can't fix that data, then we're going to recommend you start a new full, and then the data, of course, at the time of that corruption is not going to be recoverable, right? But the data before it would be. So you would just start a new set at that point and start a new full would usually be the option for that. How often should you merge is a question from Tom out there. So Tom, when by default we merge after each backup, right? So once you hit your retention, we're going to merge after each backup. Now if you imagine if I'm trying to do 15-minute backups, let's say my data change supports that, right? And now I back up and then I merge, right? That's another process that needs to run before my next backup can run. So you can schedule that merge to happen at a later period of time. And we have customers out there that have very long retention policies where, they don't start merging until maybe they're 100 in or even more. The longer that chain grows, a little bit more it takes to do the merge process and some things like that. And that's when you start looking at, having different things within your plan, not only, custom throughout the day backups, but then daily, weekly, and monthlies. And that's kind of how you can mitigate and manage that as well. And you can schedule that merge to happen at an off-hour time, kind of time so it doesn't affect your backup schedule. And I think I went through all the questions that I see. Mary, do you have any other questions out there?
Nope, I think you answered everything. I want to thank everybody who attended today and thank you for all the great questions. And of course, thank you, Stacy, for presenting all of that important information. You covered quite a lot today, so thank you so much. If anyone has additional questions after the presentation, you can reach us at arcserve.com. You can reach us by phone, which is on your slide here. It's also on the website. You can chat with us, or you can send us an online request to have a discussion. So we'll be happy to answer any additional questions you may have. This afternoon, I'll be sending out a recording of this presentation, and I will include the link to the capacity planning tool that Stacy mentioned earlier. So with that, we wrapped up our presentation. I want to thank all of you again, and have a great rest of your day.